YouTube viewers and subscribers, welcome. This is Uncle traveling back on a tour of Barbados. We start in the central parish of St. George, and we move towards the east, to the north and to the west, and then back in the central part of Barbados where we will finish this tour. We will visit some beautiful locations, and I hope you will enjoy the history of this beautiful island.
Charles Rowe Bridge. For many years we've been trying to find out who Charles Rowe was, and we still don't know. This area was once called Charles Rowe Gully, Charles Rowe Swamp, and the majority of rainfall which we get in this area comes from some areas of St. John, some areas of St. Philip, the upper areas of St. George, and this area has always been a swamp. Persons have always been washed away in Charles Rowe Bridge. There were instances of persons being washed away and from Charles Rowe Bridge and found in the Bell. The area now has become one of the major hubs, so to speak, of the St. George area. So we're just a few minutes away from the St. George Parish Church, and that church was built around 1835, 1836. It is one of the oldest churches in Barbados, and it contains a number of famous graves, including members of the famous Pearl family, which own considerable acreage of land across St. George, St. Thomas, St. James.
I am currently at St. George Parish Church.
This was a wooden church from its inception around 1835, 1836, 1837. And as hurricanes do, they constantly destroy wooden buildings. It was destroyed in the hurricane of 1661, 1667, 1673, 1710. Various hurricanes destroyed but the church. The church is rebuilt everything. The famous hurricane of 1780 came, destroyed the church again for the final time in its wooden form.
Yeah.
It was rebuilt, rebuilding started in 1782, finished in 1783, and the church opened again in 1784 in its current form, more or less.
Yeah.
Because additions were made in the period after 1784.
Okay. YouTube viewers and subscribers, I'm inside St. George Parish Church.
So this is the famous photo of Christ, which was not always here. It was stored at Low State Estate, and the thief broke into that dwelling, and he thought the owner was looking at him, seen him about to commit theft. So he poked the suspected owner in the eye, but it wasn't the owner. It was his photo of Christ.
Okay.
And it was then refurbished and placed here at St. George in its current splendor. The imagery suggests it would be quite a selective unit that these persons would belong to. Most of these stones here are from the 17th, 17th, 18th, 17th, 19th. Elite folks will be buried at the front or in the church itself. But if you look in this direction, you'll see the common folk were buried in this area at the back. The more exalted folk were buried in here or close to the church, because it felt that the closer you were buried to the church, the closer you are to God.
Okay.
And the quicker you will get to heaven.
YouTube viewers and subscribers, I'm now going to the Quakers' burial ground.
This burial ground goes back to 1670. So it's a long way back. These are other tombs: the Gittins tomb, the Pilgrim tomb, the Jones tomb. All Quakers. Is the tomb of the Gittins family, and it's also the tomb of John Redmond Bovell. John Redmond Bovell is on our $2 bill. He's on our $2 bill for two reasons. One, he was the person to carry out the experimentation on the sugar cane and sugarcane seedlings to create many different varieties. And he did that between 1880 and 1940. So Highland is the first place in the world where it was discovered that sugarcane can grow from the seeds. Highland is in St. Thomas. And the second thing about this is, you see that tree there? And this one? That's the silk cotton. Silk cotton. Now, in the old days, the silk cotton, which used to drop off, could be used for making pillows and mattresses. But you've got to get lost silk cotton. Alright? But it is also used on pole, I don't know, by phobia men and phobia women to do certain things.
We've just reached St. John Parish Church.
Come quickly. Now, this is the tomb of Joseph Briggs Mears and, of course, his family. He, as you see here, was a planter in Barbados and also a planter in British Guyana. So you have planters here who are very rich, who also established plantations in other countries. So he is one of them. And because of they're so rich, even in death, that wealth is shown by the size of their tombs. So this is one of the big planters of Barbados, Joseph Briggs Mears. So if you are Mears, if your surname is Mears, you're probably descended from this man. Because what happened is that after slavery ended, a lot of the enslaved people took surnames that were planter names or merchant names. So he's one of them. Let's go. The Barra graves and the Austin graves, these are black people. And it's very unusual for black people to be buried in this graveyard. But they were buried here because they were rich and they had influence. This man here, Bernard Leslie Barrow, was a politician and a big landowner in Massey Street. He had a shop in Massey Street. This man here was the biggest black landowner in Barbados in 1910. His name is Charles Miller Austin. He bought Malvern Plantation, which is over 300 acres, as a black man. He was a wheelwright, so he was an artisan, made some money, and gave the money to another person to buy the plantation for him. Alright? His grandson became a prime minister in Barbados. Yes, Bernard St. John, yes, it's his grandson. Alright? Yes, so he's related to Anne St. John and, you know, the St. John family. Charles Miller Austin, who was a wheelwright, bought land in St. Philip, 2 plantations in St. Philip. But Malvern is still in the family hands. So this man, Thomas Henry Seeley, lived in St. John. And he so loved this view from Hackleton's Cliff, because this is part of the cliff, that he said, on my death, I want to be buried standing. And he had his wish. This is the only standing grave that I know of. Let us go now to perhaps the biggest grave in Barbados, or the grave of the emperor, Palaeologos. Now, that's Palaeologos. I'll tell the story from here. That's Palaeologos' grave there. He's a descendant of a monarchy in Greece. A descendant. Not that he was a king or anything like that, but he's a descendant. And he came here during the English Civil War of 1645. And he established a plantation called Clifton Hall. When he died in the 1660s, they didn't bury him out here, they buried him in the church, under the church law, the organ law. And when the hurricane destroyed this building in 1831, his tomb was exposed. And they moved it and placed it right here. Paleogolis, Fernando Paleogolis. His tomb is said to be the most important tomb in this graveyard because he was a descendant of a Greek emperor. Alright? So we have the standard tomb, we have the tomb of John Howard, David John Howard Thompson, and Paleogolis tomb. So that concludes, therefore, our graveyard visit. And of course we have the building rebuilt by Adam Straw Waterman, the enslaved man who was born.
YouTube viewers and subscribers, this is Uncle Traveling Mac coming to you from Bathsheba in the parish of St. Joseph. Welcome to Bathsheba in the parish of St. Joseph, Barbados. YouTube viewers and subscribers, welcome. Uncle Traveling Mac is now at Morgan Lewis Windmill in St. Andrew.
Alright, just come over here, everybody. Welcome to the Morgan Lewis Sugar Mill. The only sugar mill in Barbados that has its arms, and the only sugar mill in the Caribbean that can work. It is not working today because some damage was sustained a few years ago and they're waiting for repairs. This plantation was organized by a man called Morgan Lewis from England. And when he started, he only had 60 acres of land. But by 1800, this was over 300 acres of land. And the main commercial activity was not sugar. So it's a combination of cattle ranching and sugarcane farming on the lower slopes. And we know that because the slave list from this plantation still exists. It's in our library at Temple campus. We know that 144 enslaved people lived here in 1870. And some of them were named after the mill. For example, there's a Betty Mill, there's an Ashley Mill, named after the mill. We believe that they worked the mill. Okay? Now, this windmill operated as a mill for grinding and sightseeing up until about 2015 or so, where you could grind sugarcane and people could come in, not commercially, and see what was happening. See these ropes here? If we were to put the canvas on this and untie these ropes, we would have action. It would move. Okay? And when it moved, I'm told that boys will climb on here, right? And go around with the mill. Of course, they're changing their grip all the time as the mill got up there. Alright? So you grind up, you hold on up here and change your grip. The mill is attached to a mill house. And there's some shafts going right down into the mill and right across. That is where your grinding occurs. We're going to take you in there in a moment, but we just want to show this part where the mill points are located. So you would add canvas to these mill points and you are ready to do your grinding. To the west of this is the boiling house. So we will show you now the boiling house. One other thing quickly. This area is now in the possession of the Barbados National Trust. Only this area. All the other areas on the plantation are still owned by the Bannister family. And the Bannister families, these are black families who operate a dairy farm. And they provide a lot of milk to the Pine Hill Dairy. So if you're drinking Pine Hill Dairy milk, you're drinking it most likely from here. Yeah, this is where canes were fed into this 3-roller mill. There are 3 rollers here. And during slavery, you didn't have this trough. So the person feeding the mill had to literally get the pieces of sugarcane and push in between those rollers. As this is moving, he's pushing these pieces of cane between the rollers. And the juice drops out on a pan down there. And then goes into a hole. I'll tell you where that juice goes after. And enslaved people would work these mills for 18 hours sometimes. And the tragedy was that sometimes if you got tired, your hands were pulled in. And there's no reverse gear in this. So to save the hands, the manager would have a cutlass or a hatchet waiting to save your life. But don't it save your life?
Yeah, because the whole body.
Yeah. You don't want your whole body hauled into the mill. So you cut off the hands and you live. To live another day. Alright? So this was the roller. This was where the juice was squeezed out. And about 65% of the juice came out. Using the steam mills, about 85 to 90% of the juice came out. So we upgraded from this to steam. This was the last windmill to start working commercially in 1948. The last one in Barbados. Right? People who worked with the steam. You had the steam factories like Warren's, Buckley, Carrington, and the list goes on.
YouTube viewers, we are about to enter the Arawak Temple.
It's a cave used as a church. Here's a man carved by the Amerindian people. Come on. Where's that? So during a hurricane, Amerindian people could live in this temple. They could worship here. And they also cut another hole to the west. This is a lookout. And you can escape from here as well. Okay? Now, if you are here for a week, where do you get your water? You see, rainwater would come from this hole in the roof. And over here, right where I am now, feel the ground. Doesn't it feel soft to you? You know why? This was the cistern, which is now covered in mud. I mean, yeah, this is a cistern, a little trough to hold water, now covered in mud. And we know that because when we look at a book called Natural History of Barbados, this cistern is mentioned in the cave itself. Natural History of Barbados, 1750 by the review. So this cistern is mentioned. After the Amerindian people moved off, the Catholics worship in here, and they were under persecution by the English, by the Anglicans. Okay, so they use this temple. Today, young men use this area for roasting breadfruit as well. So this is a little place where you can shelter, roast some breadfruit.